Hello, and welcome to the Resident Education session featuring a panel discussion about REI Fellowship and applications. A few housekeeping items before we begin. All attendees are muted automatically. Please use the chat or the questions function on your GoToWebinar chat dashboard to submit your questions at any point. This session is being recorded and will be posted under our educational recordings for later viewing. If you have questions that are not answered during the session, please email them to me, Sarah Ramaya, that is sramaya@asrm.org. I will drop my email. Today's moderator is the chair of the ASRM Education Committee, Dr. Carol Wheeler. And without further ado, take it away, Dr. Wheeler.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you so much for organizing this event in case I forget at the end. You've done an amazing job, and I'm sure our attendees will have a wonderful time and learn so much. It's really a pleasure to be here tonight. We've assembled a panel of program directors and fellows who will be here to answer all of your questions. We'll have a few sort of warm-up things to talk to you about, but I'd like each of them to introduce themselves. Let's start with our three program directors. Let's start with Dr. Spencer. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Hey everyone, I'm Jessica Spencer. I'm the program director at Emory in Atlanta, Georgia. I've been at Emory a long time. I actually did fellowship here and have been on faculty for a long time, and then got to be program director. So I'm happy to meet all of you guys virtually.
Thank you. Dr. Su?
Hi everyone, I'm Irene Zu. I am the fellowship director at the University of California, San Diego. I did my residency and fellowship at the University of Pennsylvania, and UCSD was my first job out of fellowship. So I've been here for 11 years. I met Dr. Suter because she interviewed me, and I also met Dr. Spencer because we were asking for a spot where you are now. So I'm looking forward to your questions.
Great. Dr. Suter?
Good evening, everybody. So we have Irene Suter and Irene Zu, right? So I'm the program director at the Massachusetts General Hospital. I have been at MGH since 2004. I did my residency at the University of Southern California and my fellowship at UCLA, graduated in 2003. Stayed at UCLA for 1 year on the faculty and then moved to Boston. I was the associate program director for a while and have been the program director since 2017. I'm happy to be here with you tonight and try to answer some of your questions with the hope that I can make this painful process of applying a little easier for you and kind of give you some information as to what to expect from what is coming down the pipe.
Great. We have the invisible one, Dr. Olati, if you could introduce yourself. Unfortunately, her webcam isn't working, so.
Hi, everyone. It's Ruth Lottie calling from Stanford, California. I'm the fellowship director here at Stanford, and have been at Stanford for a long time, 21 years now. I've been at Stanford, so seen a lot of changes in our program and in the interviewing process. So just like Irene, we're here just to make this process easier and smoother for you and answer any questions you have. Hopefully, we'll all be able to see each other in person soon.
Thank you. We have three fellows with us. We'll start with we're going to call the fellows by the first name. We'd established that. So Megan, you can go first.
Hi, I'm Megan Ocean. I am the current second year fellow at Brown University in partnership with Women and Infants of Rhode Island. And I originally did residency actually at a small program with the military in Portsmouth, Virginia, and was actually out as a generalist and then had the opportunity to come back into fellowship and have had an absolutely wonderful time in no small part thanks to Dr. Wheeler as well. So.
She had to say that. She's my fellow, so. Pietro?
Hi, everyone. My name is Pietro Bordeletto. I'm a second-year fellow at Weill Cornell in New York City. And I actually did med school in Chicago and was with Dr. Suter at the Mass General and Brigham program for my OBGYN residency. I'm thrilled to be here. I have so much amazing things to tell you about what REI Fellowship is like, and hopefully we can impart some tips and tricks on how we got to where we are. I think every year the process gets a little bit more complex, but I think people are paying attention and really trying to make it a little bit more straightforward and streamlined for you. And we hope to share with you a little bit about what that looks like this year. So thanks for being here.
Holly?
Hi, everybody. I'm Holly Mayer. I am currently the third-year fellow at UCLA. I did my residency at NYU and lived in New York for a long time before coming out to California. I am just excited to be here and answer whatever questions I have. I also had a bit of a non-traditional path into medicine, so I can maybe speak to some of that if some of you guys have questions about that path as well.
All right, so please feel free to put your questions in the chat, but I'd like to sort of start out with a sort of a basic understanding for those of you that are listening about sort of the timeline and process for the application. So if you look in the chat, Sarah did put in the link to the REI website, but why don't we have, actually Dr. Suter was the first to pull up the dates. So why don't you tell us a little bit about the timeline and process?
Myself, right? So it looks like they have asked us to all agree on a deadline for the submission process, right? So the deadline is May 1st. My advice to the applicants would be to try to get their applications as early as possible so that we can start printing the material and review it. It's probably going to be less stressful also than trying to get things in the last minute. Seems like Friday, June 5th is the day they decided on us releasing the results of our selection process. So we're going to have to notify the applicants that we intend to interview on Friday, June 5. Looks like on Tuesday, June 9, it's the initial deadline for the applicants to either accept or decline the interview date. So that will also give us some time to invite some people from the wait list if people, decide that they cannot fit the particular interview in their calendar. And finally, Friday, June 12 is the deadline for an alerted invited candidates as to which interview date they've been given. Most of us have one day that we interview, but I guess there are some programs that have more than one. So this applies to those programs to notify applicants of which day they have been assigned. So these are the dates I have. I don't know if you have anything additional to that.
Well, I believe they're all going to be virtual this year, right? That's correct. This is all virtual again, right? Dr. Spencer, do you have anything to add to that, or?
No, I think that's right. I think it's a new thing for us to coordinate the effort. We are not coordinating interview slots regionally. We had talked about doing that, but it ended up being a little bit too hard for all the programs to coordinate. But we should be transparent about our interview days ahead of time. So hopefully, I have not checked the website, but it should be hopefully listed on the SREI website, all the interview dates for all the programs.
Yeah, I would say we did that for the first time.
And I think can you hear me?
Which programs were on the same day, and never were there really more than 2 or 3 programs on the same date. At UC San Diego, we will interview on 2 dates because of potential overlap.
Okay, Dr. Lassie, do you have anything to add?
Same. We have 2 interview dates. They're posted on our fellowship website as well. I guess the other side of the interviews, most interviews will be done by mid-September because I think that's when all the lists are due. So it gives kind of a span of about 2.5 to 3 months to spread out the interviews. So hopefully that'll make it a little easier on the applicants not having all their interviews in the same week. Yeah, that time period seems very compressed once we start it, but it gives everybody a chance to interview and think about their list before having to submit them in mid-September.
And for context, who,
Pietro, sorry, what?
I was going to say, for context, for people who are thinking, wow, this is great, Megan, Holly, and I, when we were going through this, we had to dig through every program's website and first hope that the program website was updated, and two, find the program coordinator's email if it wasn't, to track down the interview dates. So having a singular resource where you can find all of the dates and have them spaced out enough so that you're not trying to pick one program over the other, I think is really a major improvement in the quality of life of the applicant, for sure.
Absolutely. And I think I spent a good period of time negotiating with the people I worked with in order to make sure that there was call coverage, because it wasn't just having the time off for the interview, it was the travel before and after. So while interviews over Zoom is new and different, I would say it's a lot less stressful than worrying about whether the thunderstorm is going to keep you from your interview.
So Phyllis, how do you decide which programs to apply to? I mean, obviously it's a little different virtually, but you know, that may have influenced some people's choices. But Holly, what do you think? How did you decide where to apply?
I had some geographic restrictions. I'm older, married, have kids, so I wasn't able to interview all across the country. So I had some geographic restrictions. And then I spoke to as many people as I could about what different programs were like, and tried to get a sense of what I had an interest in having more surgical experience. And so I just reached out to as many people as I could, trying to find the programs that fit within my geographic region, restrictions that had what I was interested in looking into. And so that if you have, you have a specific interest, that's another thing that you can do to sort of change which programs or decide which programs to apply to.
How about you, Pietro?
I think like Holly, I had a vision for what I wanted the training to look like and what I wanted to do through REI, and a lot of it was surgical. So I was a little less geographically restricted and kind of tracked down the programs across the country where you could get good reproductive surgical training, which I think is increasingly hard to get at a good volume and kind of the full depth and breadth of what you would be in training. So for me, a surgically minded program was important. B, my wife's also a physician, so we had to look in cities that kind of had a couple of options of academic centers for both her and I, so to maximize her academic happiness, my academic happiness. And then third of all, we wanted to be close enough to family where we could get there on a direct flight. And I can't tell you enough, you have so much more time in fellowship than you did in residency to actually be able to make some of those 3-day weekends home. And if you're able to get there on a one flight back and forth on a Friday and come back on a Monday on the 3-day weekend, it's really amazing. So I think this is finally the time where you can start to prioritize a little bit of your family life and life outside of work beyond what you did in residency or had the ability to.
Megan, how did you decide which programs to apply to?
I know, I think Pietro touches on something that's really important. I think most people, as they're entering fellowship, are at a stage that if you plan on having a family, you're in that stage of building it, whether that means that you have a committed life partner, a spouse, kids, yes, no, without a partner, with a partner. And so I think that does come into the equation for a lot of people, is making sure that you have a place your family could be, happy. I sat down with my husband and said, where would you absolutely not go? And he said, New York City. And I said, okay, I won't apply to any programs there, because ultimately it's a lot easier to stay married than to deal with all of that. And so then it was looking at a program that offered, for me, it was really important to have the freedom going into research to take that in a direction that I wanted to go, and not necessarily going into whatever the previous fellow had done before. And so looking into programs that were open for different types of research opportunities, that had kind of young, diverse programs that would really be open to, changing. I think we're such an innovative field. I didn't want to have my research go in a direction that I wasn't interested. So that was really important, as well as just generally the fit with the program. And I think the more you interact in meetings, you feel you really do get the feel of all of the different members of our society, and it's a very small group. So it was a good match that way.
I do want to encourage our attendees to put any questions in the chat. Oh, there is, we see only Dr. Pietro. That's the only thing I see in the questions. Sarah, do you, not sure quite why they're not. It could be how they have it set, because I seem to see everybody, so I don't know. Maybe it's set, I don't know.
I actually went back out and
logged in as a test user just to test it out. I think it's a system preference. And at the very top of your GoToWebinar viewer, there's a drop down where you'd have the options to choose view everyone, view who's talking, view presenter, or hide webcams. So try that option out.
Okay.
Not that Pietro's not looking gorgeous today.
He always is. You know, he looks very professional. So, program directors, let's ask you. So, when our candidates are putting together the applications, any tips for the application that they're preparing in the next month or so? Let's start with Dr. Zu. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think so. So along the way, you know, whether it's for college or for medical school or for residency, you've had people in your life who could help you to package together and look at your personal statements. And I think it's often helpful to have other pairs of eyes, you know, kind of look at that. And I think that you'll see some differences in terms of type of research training, kind of what Megan was talking about, and where you see yourself beyond 3 to 5 years of fellowship. And I think I'm really interested in reading that about what you see, not only for why you're here, but where you see yourself in a bit of time, because that's how we can figure out fit.
Dr. Suter, any thoughts on what they should put in the application or not put in the application?
So first of all, I would say that I agree with what Irene just said. I've been reviewing applications for over 10 years now, so I have my system, if you wish, on how to do it. I take a look at everything that is in the application, so there is nothing that I will overlook. I don't necessarily, give the same priority, if you wish, to everything, but I certainly look at everything that the candidate has put together. I understand that this is an extremely important moment in their life. It's important for them to choose the appropriate fit for them. So I know they have invested a lot of energy and time in that, so I want to do justice to their application. So I'll review everything. I will certainly pay a lot of attention to things that will tell me what's unique about this applicant. So one thing I would advise them is to make sure they communicate to me anything they want me to hear. If there is something unique about them, or their experiences, their interests, or potentially something they want to talk more about or explain a little bit. Another thing I would say is that applicants tend to look for big names in their when they look for letters of recommendation. And I would say that it's important that at least one of the letters is from a person that knows them well, because I can see who knows the applicant well and who just happened to read their CV, right? And of course, I'm going to pay attention to all of those, but I can see who's the mentor, who's the person that spent more time and can give me a little more personal information about their personality, the way they relate to patients, the research interest, their ability to be productive. So at the end of the day, even if that's one letter, I think that's important because it tells me a little more about what's unique in that particular applicant.
Dr. Spencer, do you have anything to add?
Maybe a couple things. I mean, one is I would be your authentic self. This is not a time to try and make yourself different or, I think it's if you have a genuine interest in something that's unique, that's great, and you should put it on there, but you don't have to create things. We just really want to get to meet you. Be polished. So look at your application, get rid of those typos and those errors, have people review it for you. Make sure you have little blurbs under every activity explaining what your role was in that activity. And just really take the time to pause and look at everything and make sure there aren't any sloppy parts. It really just shows that you care and this is important. And then the last thing I would say is it is important to put everything on your CV and on your application, but you don't have to fluff it too much. Like we want to know what kind of research you've done, but you don't have to kind of create publications that aren't really publications and things like that. So just again, that goes back to being authentic. Be authentic. This is, you're not going to suddenly change your background 1 month before the application. So just make sure it's polished and nice.
So we're starting to get some questions coming in. So recommendations for how to make yourself a competitive applicant coming from a program with no REI rotation or fellowship. How about Dr. Lati? Do you have anything to add there?
Yeah, sure. I want to just on the basic application as well question. I would go back to that for a second, then answer your question here. So a trap I think a lot of applicants fall into is trying to guess what people want to hear about them and trying to be good at everything. When we are becoming professionals, we excel in one area, not every area. It's impossible to be the world's best surgeon, the most in-depth basic scientist, the greatest leader, the most compassionate physician in the world at all times. So most people by this time in their training know what their true strengths are. And I would say rather than spending a lot of energy trying to balance out your application to look the same as everyone else, I would say spend a good part of your application showing us your strengths, your best sides, because those are the things that are going to that's the area you're going to excel. Regarding applicants who are coming from programs where there is not a lot of REI clinical rotations or opportunities, I think this is a tricky one. This actually puts there are some opportunities for residents from these types of programs, but I think you have to take some initiative. Ways to meet people and get more exposure are through away rotations, are through, I've seen some residents really partner with a community physician who's doing REI work in their community to get some more exposure that way. When possible, try to attend some of the meetings, such as the ASRM sponsored meetings. There are smaller regional meetings. I know on the West Coast there's a Pacific Coast Reproductive Society meeting that it's smaller. It's a way to meet people and kind of get some networking opportunities and get to know the field a little bit better. It also gives you a little bit more, I don't know what the right word is. It's something to talk about, or a shared experience, or hey, I thought I was interested in REI. Then I went to ASRM or Pacific Coast and I heard this talk on PCOS and really got interested. So I started to work with the generalists or the pediatric endocrine clinics at my institution to learn more about PCOS and how we can help teenagers. So you can build a story without having any built-in REI rotations. So those are some things that I've seen that have been very successful in applicants.
Great ideas, thank you. So here's one for the fellows. Was reaching out to contacts the only way to find out the specific focuses of programs such as surgical or research focused? Let's start with Megan on that one.
Sure. So I do think all of the programs right now are actually working on creating videos or other publishable content that we will have on our websites. And I think that hopefully will make this, again, a more transparent process. again, I'm going to echo what Dr. Lati said. If you get involved in your regional community and you have an idea of just, I mean, we're not saying know exactly what you want to do your thesis on, but an idea of, I really love lab science. I really just want to do infertility. I really want to make sure surgery is part of my practice. You'll kind of gravitate towards people that are in that area. You'll go to those particular talks. You'll start to recognize the programs that are involved in that. And again, now because everything is virtual and residents usually have a much decreased cost, even if you can only go for a couple of sessions, you'll very quickly start to tag, which programs are going to have the types of content that you want to go into.
Pietro, you have anything to add?
Yeah, I have a little trick actually. So if you're trying to get a sense of a program, one of the easy ways to do it is go on PubMed and go on the program's website and type in some of the names of the faculty. Most REI divisions aren't that big, talking about a handful of people, but on its biggest, 2 or 3 people. You see a lot of stuff on PGT, a lot of stuff on surgery, you see a lot of stuff on just basic science and embryology. You'll get a flavor for what the program is intellectually putting out and what kinds of research you could do, what kinds of clinical things you could be involved in. But just looking at the publication list and skimming through some abstracts. That's what I did when there were programs where I didn't really have a lot of reconnaissance on and get a good feel on what's this program all about. And that's pretty easy. You can do that from home.
Holly, do you have anything else to add to help them?
I mean, I mostly tried to talk. I came from, I had the luxury of coming from a program that has a lot of REI applicants. A lot of the residents go into REI. And so I personally, I did the same trick that Pietro did, which is to look at the publications of the faculty members there. But I also just, like anybody who I knew who did an REI fellowship, I just asked them, where did you apply? What do you remember about that program? Oh, that's a place that I could live. What do you remember about that? It doesn't have to be, it just can, it can be a casual conversation with anybody that you know that's been through the process recently. It doesn't have to be, I think that's the easiest way to do it, because at least when I was applying, a lot of the websites were not that revealing about what made the program unique. And so it's more about talking to, it doesn't have to be talking to people who actually went through the program and did it. It can just be people who have sort of been through the interview trail. And, because when you're going through the process, you're really like living and breathing every program and everyone's interviewing everywhere. And so you really kind of are processing what your impression of different types of programs are. So I think that's a good strategy, but also definitely looking on PubMed for sure.
Here's a question that we had last fall. Can you talk about away rotations? Is there a good resource to see what programs offer them? Did any of these fellows do any away rotations during their residency? I know SREI is working on something to put together on their website. So if you look there may be, but it's been, obviously this year has been tough, right? With COVID and are there virtual away rotations? So I know that's been tough. Megan, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I did an away rotation at the NIH. I came from a smaller residency that had 2 REIs that both didn't do IVF in our center. And so I really wanted to make sure before I committed 3 more years and umpteen hours of my life that this was what I wanted to do. And I do know that the NIH still has that available and that you can apply to that. I think that that's a great opportunity to get some broader experience as well. It is a little NIH specific, but I think if you are coming from a small program, that also gives you some really competitive options to be involved in research as well.
Yeah, I know that a lot of fellows do, fellow applicants do research at the NIH, and they have quite the program there. So hopefully, maybe you can link up with another program near you. one of the comments was, I submitted my fellowship application in December and got the opportunity to do a away rotation in New Hampshire this May. That has not been included in my fellowship application. So how can I communicate this to programs? So somebody's already submitted their application in December, I guess, and they're doing this away rotation. So Dr. Spencer, how would you want them to communicate that information to you? So like in addition to their application.
Yeah, I mean, December's really early, so I think an addendum would probably be the thing to do. I do get addendums through the program coordinator occasionally. Usually it's just an email to the program coordinator. I had the following publications, or, you know, these 2 abstracts. And then we just kind of take that, print it, and put it in your file. So I would probably just do it that way. And I would do it, you know, closer to the appropriate deadline time so that it's accurate and you don't have to do a second addendum.
Yeah, I think that's the, can you please comment on any communications during the process, i.e. post-interview communication, pre-interview to express special interest? Sort of, yeah, do you kind of let the program know before or after, I really want to come there? Or do you have, oh, here's another one, should you have like your attending communicate with the attendings there? Is that good? Is that bad? Dr. Suter, what do you think?
Yeah, so first of all, there are 2 questions here. So the first question is, you know, communications prior to the submission of the application. So I think when somebody wants to find out more about REI, and they have an REI fellowship where they are, it does make sense to approach the program director if they still have questions and find out more about the process in that particular institution, which might be applicable to other institutions as well. So I think that's very reasonable. I think the program director has the opportunity to advise that candidate, right, within the program. And I think this definitely changes once applications are submitted, because the program director does not want to favor any candidates, whether they come from their own institution or outside, by having, let's say, the face-to-face communication that you would have had prior to the submission of the application. After the submission of the application, I definitely welcome any emails that the candidates, with questions that the candidates have. I do want to make sure that the candidates understand what the program has to offer. So I encourage them to reach out to me. And I certainly encourage any communications from people that know them very well and know their wishes and plans and strengths and want to, you know, support their application. Obviously, people, you know, write letters to support the applicants. But if a particular applicant feels very strongly that they want an individual to reach out, I certainly, you know, will welcome any such communication. At the end of the day, I feel that it is important for the applicant to land in the program where they really want to be so that they can flourish. But it's also important for us to have the opportunity to know the applicants as the best way possible, because I've said many times people have to do a residency, but they do not have to do a fellowship. So the way they approach it is very different, and it's extremely important for them to be happy and to feel like this is a good match for them. It is 3 years of their life. It's a big sacrifice. Everybody else is out in practice making money, and they're back in training. And I respect that transition. So I do want to encourage any type of communication that helps them select carefully and helps me and my colleagues find the proper match.
Dr. Su, you want to comment on that?
I think that what Irene has said, I really agree with and don't have much to add. I think when folks are here for their interview day, I'm really clear that if there's information that's going to help us figure you out or help you figure us out, great. And I really echo what the fellow said earlier, which is you got to know about the fit, right? So understanding, talking to as many people as possible, reading on the type of research that's happening, because we don't know what things are going to be for the year that you guys start fellowship, but right this moment, it's still 18 months of research in the REI fellowship. That may change to 12 months depending on some communication between ACGME and ABOG. But I think that traditionally, I remember I wrote, I don't know how many thank you letters to every single person that I met. And I don't think we need, I don't need that, and we don't need that, but more so that we understand each other.
Yeah, I think it's a little different than residency applications, right? I mean, you have, lots of spots and you interact with lots of different people along the times of your residency, but when you're in REI fellowship, you're with a relatively small group of attendings and other fellows and staff. And so you spend a lot of time with the same people. I think our fellows will attest to that. So I think it's a little different. So here's a different one. We have a junior person. We have a PGY1 who's very interested in REI. If you could give someone at my stage any advice to make themselves a competitive applicant, what would it be? Let's start with Holly. What would you suggest? And then we'll go to our attendings.
I think that if you're interested, just taking advantage of what opportunities are available to you because you have 4 years to sort of build that, it's in the capacity that you are interested in it. So research is important. If you have access to research in the field, that's great. But if you're also a person who's really into being involved in administrative stuff, reaching out to ASRM or other societies and trying to get involved that way, having roles within ASRM is another way to be involved. I think it's hard in residency because you really are putting a lot of time and effort into that training. And so I think it's important that if you know what you want, that you pick a couple of things that you feel like you probably are willing to give up some of your limited free time to, that you are passionate about. And it doesn't have to be a million things, especially if it's something that you have like a long-term and there's some progression in what you're doing. And that's the other thing, just like more in general in terms of applications. Yes, you want to put everything in there, but you don't need to put every single thing you've ever done. Like if it was significant and you feel like you can talk about it and it added something to who you are as a physician, then great. But the fact, I don't know, there are a lot of applications that are so long that it's hard to find the things that are actually meaningful that the resident did, because they just have every single activity that they've ever done in them. And so I think in general, like picking something that you feel like, and if it's not the right fit, you switch and do something else, it's fine. But if you could reflect on what you think is something that you're going to have passion for and you'll be willing to give up your limited free time to, I think that's important.
A comment on research or how to prepare yourself for becoming a competitive applicant. One of the things people don't realize is you don't necessarily need to have REI specific research. So if there isn't an REI or an REI program where you're doing residency, a couple of other ways to get research kind of within the field without being in the field. Some ideas like reaching out to the pediatrics group at your hospital, see if they have a disorders of sexual development clinic that you could collaborate with. Are there minimally invasive surgery attendings in your hospital that you could collaborate on research with? The GYN pathologist at your hospital may have some stuff that they've been wanting to write up, or even the endocrinologist at the hospital probably take care of patients with PCOS or hypothyroidism, all things that are tangentially related to our field, eminently important to our field, but don't require a reproductive endocrinologist to do research with. So there's a couple of ways to get creative early on as a PGY1, even at a place that doesn't have an REI fellowship.
Absolutely, and I would totally echo what Pietro said, and I think it is much more impressive when we're looking through and you speak about that research with passion and understanding of every step of what happened than being attached to the biggest study as, you know, an author that kind of got dragged in at the last minute. So I think fellowship is really about, again, finding something that you're so passionate about that you want to sacrifice those 3 years of your life for. So similarly, find something that is within what you're doing now and follow it to that end. Yeah.
Great. Now the questions are coming in fast and furious. So for the fellows, what is the one piece of advice that you wish you would have known as a resident who is interested in applying to REI? The one piece. Let's go back to Holly.
That's hard. I think, I don't know if this is advice. I know. I don't know. I think something that I really appreciate in looking at applications that I didn't realize when I was putting my own application together. It's only after reading a bunch that you can really use your personal statement, and you should use your personal statement to tie things together. Or if there's something in your application or something that happened in your life that was a bump in the road, or if you didn't pass a step, or if because all we see is just like numbers and lists, and your personal statement is a way for you to like explain who you are as a person. And explain if there's something that's maybe a red flag in your application, like explain what you learned from that or why that happened or whatever it is. Use the personal statement as a way to like tie everything together, I guess, in your application, rather than these like individual data points that the rest of the application can feel like a little bit.
Megan, do you have anything? Any one tip you wish you'd gotten?
So this was actually something that I was told. Again, I did an away rotation at the NIH, and the researcher that I worked with said, you're coming from a small program, you're not going to have a lot of research on your application. So you better know this inside and out. And that includes the statistics. So we're going to sit down and do those together. And so, you know, again, statistics is not my passion, but it is what makes things work. And so I think, again, if what matters is not just how much you have there, but the depth of which you have passion for that and understanding for that. And I think that that's important, because we will see people with page-long applications who then, you know, when we speak to them, are not the first pick.
Pietro, you have anything you wanted to add? One tip?
I think someone told me this really early on, was that rare things are rare. So don't go into the field because you like taking care of that one rare thing that you'll maybe see a handful of times during fellowship and a handful of times as an attending. Like if you're coming into the field because you want to be the FSH receptor antibody person and you want to do your research on that, you're gonna have a really hard time enjoying the other stuff, the IVF, the reproductive endocrine. That is kind of the beast of what your training looks like and what most of what you do in attending code. So go into it with a broad enough interest into the field as being the major driver, and let the narrow stuff kind of flourish and find ways to enjoy some of the rarer things in our field, but don't make it kind of the centerpiece of your application, for example.
I think we've touched on this next question a little bit, but I'll ask the program directors, how do fellowship programs look at research not based in REI when considering applications? I mean, I think we've talked about it a little bit, but anyone want to go for that one? The non-REI research?
I can tackle that.
Okay,
yes.
Irene?
Yeah, so we want to see depth. And so if you have 5 abstracts, but no publications, I'm really wondering, why did you not convert that to a paper? And I would rather that you had a neurology paper and then you told us why you switched from neurology to reproductive endocrinology. By the way, if you want to work on FSH receptors, you should be coming to UCSD. And then the other piece that I wanted to say was that even for the PGY1 is that even if you know you want to do REI, at the end of the day, we're women's health physicians. So we really want you to be in-depth trained in all aspects of OBGYN, even if you know upfront that you have a specialty. Yeah, So that's what I wanted to say.
Dr. Suter, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, so I will agree with everything that was said before. At the end of the day, programs are different. Residents have different opportunities, and at the same time, as somebody mentioned, they have many challenges, and we're well aware of that. And we also look at programs that are smaller and don't have REI divisions and don't have as many opportunities for research differently than programs that have many, many opportunities. In other words, if a resident is applying from a very strong academic program, I expect different things from them compared to somebody that is in a small community program, right? I cannot judge them the same way. So any kind of research shows that people can be productive in research. They can ask the question, they can write a manuscript, they can defend what they wrote through the review process, right? So for me, that's more important than a paper in REI. I also, expect residents to be exposed to all other subspecialties. Maybe at some point they were thinking they want to go to MFM or urogynecology. There's nothing wrong with that. They don't have to prove to me that, they knew they wanted to go to OBGYN and REI since they were 15 years old. This doesn't happen, right? It didn't happen to me either. I mean, I decided I wanted to go to REI when I was a third-year resident. So nothing wrong with that. As people said, we're women's health providers, and we like every aspect of what we do. And yes, maybe we decided we want to focus more on REI. So I give it equal weight. I do want to see that at some point they do show some interest, right? They went to the ASRM, they had a small abstract, and like Irene said, having multiple abstracts that don't translate into the applicant taking this to the next step doesn't look good. At the same time, I don't expect everybody to have a published manuscript. There is a short period of time for residents to flourish in that aspect, but at the same time, I do want to see things taken, the applicant taking a lead, if you wish, even if it wasn't an abstract, right? They were the first or the second author. They knew a lot about it when I asked them. It's not like, they were, just like somebody said, dragged into it the last minute, right? They have ownership of that work. So I don't necessarily go crazy about numbers or specifically the topic, provided that the resident remained involved, right? Some people were involved in medical school and really fell behind in residency. Others were doing a PhD and were very active during their PhD, but never really published anything while they were residents, despite the fact they had this background in research. So just staying constantly involved is something more important than being 100% focused on, laser focused on a particular topic. I don't expect that from a resident.
And the nice thing to remember about the application is that there's an opportunity for you to list, like Dr. Suter said, anything that you're working on at any stage of development. Things where an IRB is submitted, things where a manuscript is drafted, things where a manuscript is submitted and awaiting review, or in press, or actually published with a citation. So no matter where you are along kind of the research journey, by the time you submit your application, there's a way to tell that story on the application. So you don't have to get hung up on it. It needs to be in a physical journal with a page number.
So we have a couple of questions, a little different topic. Regarding letters of recommendation, I have heard that some programs require a third letter from the residency program director versus a chair letter. Would it be appropriate to submit a joint chair program director letter? Dr. Spencer.
Yeah, I think it's totally appropriate to do a joint letter. A lot of programs actually have moved to that, where the program director and the chair will write a joint letter. I wanted to add two little things to prior comments. So one was, I wish somebody had told me when I was a resident to form your own personal mentorship panel. I had one. I had Irene. She was a fellow when I was a resident, and she was a good cheerleader for me. And you need them at all different stages. So you need like an upper level resident, you need a fellow, you need some attendings, maybe an REI, but maybe not if you don't have an REI program. If you happen to have a program director or REI faculty that you can talk to at your division, great. Meet with them early on and have them look at your CV and say, what do you see missing? What can I focus on? You have an opportunity to get some good feedback early on so you can focus on those things. So I didn't want to go back to a question, but I wanted to mention that.
Perfect. Yeah, I think that's probably pretty straightforward. The next question is sort of a COVID related one. At my program, due to COVID this year, taking Creogs this year was not easily accommodated for due to the restrictions on the number of people in the same space. I know some programs are requesting Creog scores up to the PGY3 year. Would there be additional information that I should include, or will it not impact my application? COVID's really made a mess of things. Dr. Lottie, do you have any thoughts on it? So they weren't able to do Creogs. They don't have Creog scores.
Yeah, sure. I think that it makes perfect sense to explain that. And I think that our program and any program would be extremely accommodating to all the challenges of the last 15, 18 months that we've all been through. There's going to be a big asterisk on all activities in 2020. I think that, even in terms of research productivity and just how everybody's schedule got thrown into the wind with all the changes in rotations, I think that it's going to be a very different year or two as we're seeing residents come through this. So yes, if COVID impacted your ability to do a rotation, take a test, study for a test, take a test in a way, when you had enough rest, any of those things, I think it's very important. And we all want to hear that because we want to be fair and accommodating, that we realize that this pandemic has affected all of us severely, but some of us in different ways than others. And we'll never know it if no one tells us.
Right, you may be at a program where you were deployed to cover the emergency room for several months, or you were, potted out and you didn't have as much time in your REI. We have some of our residents in our program, I know, that did no REI because they were potted out the whole time during their first REI rotation. And so, hopefully those aren't people that are going into REI, but it's really, I think it's impacted a lot of people. So how important are the Creog scores to make your application competitive? Anyone want to take that one on?
Yeah, I do like seeing Creog scores, but I would say not having taken it because of COVID doesn't do you a disservice at all. I would say maybe bombing all your Creogs might do you a disservice. So I would probably, if you are going to take it, I would study and I would do your best. And I would do your best in all your rotations, not just REI, but do your best on the GYN onc and MFM rotations and labor and delivery, because that's how you get those really strong program director letters.
So here's a different question. I think a couple of our fellows can answer this one. Do any of the panelists have advice for applicants with a more non-traditional route to fellowship, i.e. taking time between residency and applying to fellowship, doing private practice or research? Megan, you want to address that one?
Sure. So I finished residency and I'm actually active duty in the Air Force. And so while I knew I wanted to do REI, the Air Force did not agree. And so I went out and did 4 years in general practice. And as my younger co-fellow tells me, I was an adult. And I think there's definite good things and bad things. I think you become a lot more comfortable being independent and being, comfortable in hard situations when you're doing the C-HIST in the middle of the night and things like that. And you also become much more confident in your decision to go forward with REI if that's what you want to do. I think there are a number every year that come into fellowship from outside of directly going through residency. And I think some programs tend to have a few more, some tend to have a few less. But everywhere that I interviewed did not see that as a con. I think they saw it as just something that made me different. And they wanted to make sure that, yes, I was interested in coming back to learning. But I think that was one of the things I was most excited about, is having that opportunity as I was chatting with Pietro, it's nice on research to have time to think about things. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about fellowship and research, et cetera. So I don't think that it's the right decision for everyone, but if you are considering whether you think maybe general practice is where you should be, then go out and do it for a little while. And if you decide to come back to REI, you are going to have to connect back into the community. That would be my one caveat. I do think if you go out and then try to come back into fellowship, making sure you're either attending meetings, involving yourself in research, I think those are really important, because otherwise disappearing out into general practice land, it is hard to be a little bit competitive.
Holly, do you have anything to add to that?
I would agree with what Megan said, that everybody has their own path to get where they are trying to get. I would say that if you're coming from outside of residency, that again, I don't know why I feel like the personal statement, because we don't get to meet you in person until we've decided to give you an interview, and once that bar is passed, then it's like a totally different experience. So you can sort of think of your personal statement as like, so here's my interview, here's my elevator pitch or whatever. I think it's important, if you're coming from any kind of non-traditional route, that you kind of paint a picture of how that happened and what you've done to get yourself into the situation. Because I feel like not that this is necessarily, I've definitely read applications from people who are coming outside of residency where I couldn't figure out why they were applying for REI, that the story wasn't clear, and then you have to kind of make your own story, right? Like everybody is if you have a different application than other people are going to want to know how you got to where you are. So I think just use that as an opportunity to make it clear that you're ready to learn, you're excited about, moving into this other field, and it's not just like, I can't wake up at 3 a.m. to deliver another baby, I need something else in my life. Like, that can't be the reason. I mean, maybe
a little bit.
I don't know. It's harder, maybe, but there needs to be another story.
So we have several questions more about the Creogs, and people sort of want to know, like, is there what is a strong Creog score, and do you need USMLE step scores? And I mean, speaking as someone who has been a program director, I think that's a hard question, right? We want to ship, it's all sort of relative in terms of the rest of your application. I think it's just one piece. Any of you want to sort of address sort of like, they want a number, but I don't really think there's a specific number that none of us are going to give it, even if we have one. I don't think that.
I think that at least we kind of often at UCLA kind of discuss applications as a group. So at least here, it's not that there's a cutoff, it's just in the end, you have to be able to pass your boards in order to do this job. And so that's sort of like the bar. Like, are we really worried that you're not going to be able to pass your boards? And then if there are multiple situations where that is potentially an issue, then I think those Creogs get used, or the USMLE gets used. But otherwise, it maybe adds if you were have amazing scores, but I don't think it's an end all be all. It's probably like the last thing that we look at.
Anyone else have any thoughts on that? Irene Suter, Dr. Suter?
Yeah, so I kind of agree with Holly in the sense that, first of all, people shouldn't worry if COVID didn't allow them to take the Creogs, because obviously they're not going to be alone. All they have to do is explain it, if the program director hasn't explained that in his letter. I suspect that the program director will explain that in the letter. But in any case, if needed, they can just include a very brief explanation in the personal statement, and that's good enough. Just like everybody said, we know there were plenty of challenges. Second, there's no cutoff. Everybody is allowed to have a weak test day, right? Provided that doesn't repeat itself. because as Holly said, the only reason we look at that is not to judge anybody's IQ, is really to make sure that if we do our part and the fellow does their part, that they will not be extremely challenged in passing their boards, because everybody needs at the end of the day to pass their boards. So you just don't want to be out of the range, if you wish, where most residents would have been in their age range, right, in their class. And this is provided in the scores, right? They just kind of give us roughly an estimate of what percentile that falls for every year, and we're not looking for the 95th or the 99th percentile. We're not ranking people based on their scores. We just want to make sure they're within an acceptable range. That's all. And as Holly said, it would be equally important whether it is the Creogs or the USMLEs.
Right, so you don't want somebody that's just barely passed their USMLEs and then they just barely passed their Creogs. You're thinking, are they going to like slip below when they take their boards? We all, as you know, in our fellowships, we need to maintain. We want our people to pass, but we're in trouble if we don't have people pass. So I think it's a combination of things. So it's really
everybody's in trouble when the candidate does not pass. The candidate at the program.
Yeah. Oh, I accidentally deleted the last question. Oh, whoever gave me the last question, please put it back in again. I got a little crazy on the trash can moniker, but I think we are approaching the end. Oh, I think they wanted to have emails of the candidates and of the program directors and fellows. And if it's okay with you, we can have Sarah send them out to the panelists. Obviously, you know, don't email us every day, but a few pointed ones since I accidentally deleted, besides being authentic, of course. So the fellowship interview questions, any golden tips on how to prepare for your virtual interviews? I think we plan on this being an hour, but we'll give it a few more minutes if everybody's willing to hang in for a few more minutes. So golden tips on how to prepare. We haven't really talked much about the actual virtual interview. Any thoughts on how to prepare for your virtual interview?
I think, you know, be prepared, be present, right? So attend a lot of the programs will have a sort of informal meet the fellows event. That's not required, but if you're really curious about a program, that's where you're going to learn the most information. So take advantage of that. And then, you know, be on time and be present. Don't be distracted if at all possible. If something comes up during your interview, rather than try to hide it, just be upfront about it and tell someone, because these are challenging times, and a few times that happened and it sort of put a strain on an interview when really it could have been, you know, easily accommodated by a different time or something like that. So I think, you know, just like you would for in-person interview, you know, take a deep breath, be yourself, have a moment and pay, you know, close attention and be present. And that's really, you know, your time is your gift to us to show us that we're important, and the time that you spend with us is important to you. So you can show a lot just by being attentive and present.
Pietro?
I'm a textbook over-preparer. So my best tip for people who are going into fellowship interviews later this year is to have a plan. And my plan was, this was still in the day where people got on airplanes, but I had kind of a packet of things that I always put on with. One was my full ERAS application printed front to back. Then one was another one-page summary of kind of the high points, or my little script on things that I wanted to remind myself of that I was pretty good at forgetting, and things that I wanted to make sure that I shared with that program. And that's right on the plane right there. That's what I would read if I got to the interview early and was sitting in the lobby and had some time. And then before getting on that airplane, I always did a little bit of background research. So that PubMedding that I told you about, I'd try to get a sense of what the attending's interests were. I'd look on the SART website to get a sense of what their volume was. Are they taking care of a lot of young patients? Are they really kind of taking care of a lot of older patients? And really taking a deep dive on their website. There's a surprising amount of information you can gain from the website informally. A lot of programs, unfortunately, have older, less updated websites, but I think the millennial generation has a way of finding what they need to find on a website. So I think become the master of the program before you even step foot. Know what the faces look like. Know who the program director is. Know who the associate program director is. Know if the chair is also an REI in the division. These are all the kinds of things that if you step foot or into that room or log into that Zoom, you'll feel so much more at ease knowing that you've prepared and there's really very little that's new that you're going to learn beyond what they're going to tell you.
With a fine line. There is times where people come across as slightly stalkerish.
Pietro, that was you.
But I think Pietro's comment on being prepared, I had at least 6 to 7 pages of notes on every single program before I walked in the door. And trying to make sure that you know what you're talking about and then that you know yourself and read that last. Because the program is going to want to have you because you're a wonderful applicant and a wonderful person to work with day in, day out, not because you like their research. So that's the kind of magical moment of being legitimate, being your authentic self.
I think it's hard.
But also okay to say you don't know something. It's also okay to say you don't know something. I would definitely prefer to say, have an applicant say something like, boy, I wish I knew that, or rather than, I don't know, make something up that's wrong or not true. That's a much bigger concern in an interview, that somebody's, you know, answering with wrong information than just being honest and saying they don't know.
Right. So if somebody asks you about this paper that you have on your application and you're the third author and you get asked a detailed question, you can say, well, unfortunately, I was only peripherally involved in writing, but this paper that I worked on, can I tell you a little bit more about this? Because this was really where I spent the bulk of my time and my energy, and I was passionate about it. I think that makes it much better. So the question I accidentally deleted was, should I email Creog scores to all programs? So I don't think all programs, but the ones you're applying to, I would think would want to have them. Is that a fair statement? Or so how many programs?
I think the programs will request it. Yeah, I think if there were a program will request it if they want it. Just have it ready.
How is the virtual interviewing how is that different? Anyone have thoughts on that?
And we thought a lot about that last year, and I think as program directors had also had some exchanges about sort of the length of time, whether some programs are still a whole day and we are partakers of Zoom fatigue, so we are a half day. We tried to organize it so both East Coast and West Coast interviewees have an easy time, so we don't start at like 5 a.m. or something like this for somebody. And then the other thing I wanted to add to the last conversation was, I don't know how you guys will make your decision this year sight unseen. So please, like whatever questions you have about our program, about what it's like to live where we are, ask us, because it's a really big decision you have to make.
Any other thoughts about the virtual world? Dr. Suter?
My biggest concern was whether my applicants can actually get the feeling of what our program has to offer. I was not worried about getting the feeling of the applicants, because I kind of felt like, you know, I invested a lot of time reviewing the application and trying to learn as much as I can about the applicant before the applicant comes in. I did not feel I missed much at the interaction I had in those 25 minutes that we interacted over Zoom. But I was hoping that also at the same time I could convey to them a little bit of the, you know, spirit, if you wish, or whatever our place had to offer. So I was a little more concerned about that. So I was hoping that the applicants will reach out to our fellows, our residents, whoever else they might know at the institution, or do due diligence to understand what our program has to offer. So for the same reason, I was also very open to, you know, answering questions over email that the applicants might have had, because I just wasn't sure that at the end of the day they got that. The other thing I would say is to facilitate the process, as Pietro and everybody else said before, doing as much homework as you can before helps, because then you can focus your questions to the program director or to the other faculty to the few things that you really didn't get an answer for in the process of preparing for that interview. Because it's important for us also to let you know what's unique about us. So I just always want to make sure I have enough time to let applicants know more about what our program is all about.
I don't think there are any more questions, and I think it's been quite an evening. I really appreciate all of the panelists for being part of the panel, and the comments in the chat. The attendees were also grateful and thanked us so much. Let's see. I think Sarah did say that she's sent out a survey link. If you have additional questions, you can certainly email them directly to Sarah, SREI@asrm.org. And in addition to our emails, I think we will be sending out a wonderful description of the process put together by Megan. She put it together and is willing to share it with all of you, and I think you're going to find it extremely helpful. And so Sarah will be sending it out to all of you. Megan, if you just want to forward it directly to Sarah, I don't remember if I did or not. I don't think I did. But if you can send it to her, then she'll send it out to all of you that attended, and also to our panelists, so they can see what she put together and maybe give feedback if we're going to revise it at some point. And I appreciate it. So have a wonderful evening. Thank you all so much for joining us, and stay safe, and hopefully we'll all be in person at ASRM in October. We're keeping our fingers crossed that we'll be able to actually all get to Baltimore. So take care and have a great evening.
You too. Have a good night. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you, Dr. Wheeler, for moderating a fantastic session. To our panelists, thank you very much for being very patient and answering every single question. And to our attendees, thank you for your participation. We hope you found this discussion helpful. Please send any further questions for our panelists. I've dropped my email address down there. And please don't forget to complete the survey. It was emailed to you. It's down here in the link in the chat box, and you might receive it as part of your survey or your thank you email. This session was recorded, and we will have it up on our website, and we plan to have many more such panel discussions and other resident-related activities. So watch out for your emails, and this concludes the session. Good night, all.